We are continuing unit 43 of the Morenu units for the Minucha of Surname Danger and Sir Moses Montefiore. Last week, we started learning about the special Heter that allows us to carry Muktze based on the extent of repulsion. Is that a good word? Based on the extent of repulsion. Right? That's a good word, right? Repulsion. Repulsion. Okay. Yeah, things that are repulsive, you may carry, right? I think that's a fair word, right? Fair phrasing. That might sound weird. Sorry. So one of the issues we had there was that two main issues came up. One is that the definition is very hard to gauge, right? There's clearly there's an extent of repulsion that does not necessarily depend on the objective nature of the item, but depends on the context, right? Something that's going to be on the Shabbos table, where we eat, will be our tolerance will be much lower, right? As opposed to something that's in the garden, our tolerance may be higher, etc. That's one aspect. So it's not that we have an objective things that are repulsive enough are not muktze, but we could alleviate our repulsion by getting rid of whatever it is from there within the context and the frame of where we are. That's one issue. The other issue is the issue of parameters, right? Sorry, this already creates the parameter problem, right? Who could say I'm istinis enough I'm mistinous enough to say, no, this really repulses me, I have to get rid of it, right? It's
subjective.
Right, and once you say it's subjective, so you say, here's the problem. I want to go a bit deeper into this because we have to appreciate there's a kind of a double problem here. The one problem is that it's subjective, and you say, fair enough, there are many halachot that are subjective, but at least we have some kind of parameter, at least we have some kind of clear view of what we're looking for exactly. Here we say something is repulsive. Okay, define repulsive. Like, how repulsive? It's very hard to gauge that because it's not only is it subjective. Generally in halacha, it's we don't like leaving things too subjective, but it gets worse because not only is it subjective, we also don't have a very clear view of what the parameters should be. It's like something that is repulsive. Okay, how repulsive? I don't know. It's uncomfortable. How uncomfortable? It's not only that that's subjective. It's also we have no way of gauging how much. I'll give an example. I give the example from Pikuach Nefesh.
The definition.
Right. To define more clear in Pikuach Nefesh, Rabbi Akiva Eiger tries to gauge how Pikuach Nefesh does something need to be to justify an Yisur D'Oraita of Shabbat, or Kippur, or whatever, right? So he starts going to 1,000, 1,000, he brings proof from here, he tries to give us some kind of Pikuach Nefesh. Everything's Pikuach Nefesh. You cross the street, you can get run over by a steamroller, right? So Elamai, that happens once in Chvest, right? So that's not enough. Okay, how much is enough? Right? Here it's even worse because there at least you can say, okay, 1 in X. There's statistics. There's something you can peg your head on something, but here we don't even know what repulsion means. So why? Because
we all know what you would have a standard. Difference. We all know what you would not say in the room.
It's again the subjective. We're not going to definition.
I understand.
So now you're giving a definition that Bemet the poskim didn't say, which it's a user definition. What? They should. Yeah, they say it should be. If the parameter would be something that during the week you would remove fast enough. Whatever, right? You'd stop if it was here in the shiur. You'd get up and get rid of it because you can't sit when it's in that circumstance. Whatever, right? And the poskim didn't give us any kind of guideline. No, he's saying you'd go out of your right.
No, I'm just saying.
Right. It's yeah. So that's a bit of a problem.
Yeah.
Now, the problem there is that Mordechai was saying the issue with that is that then you end up. The Mordechai said that my problem is giving a broad scale heter. He says, look, if you're an istanis, right, someone of a gentle nature, is that how you say istanis? If you're sort of a sensitive nature, sensitive, no, particular. All right. If you're an
delicate.
Sorry? What, Robin?
Delicate.
I'm not hearing the delicate. Someone of a delicate nature. All right. Someone of a delicate nature, right? If you're an istanis, says the Mordechai, if you're an istanis, clearly you can have there's a lot more tamatir things that really that you find repulsive. But the problem is, who is to tell us who is the istanis? And now you end up, for example, eliminating the whole category of Muktze Mechad Mus completely, right? And not only that, many Muktze Mechad Gufot too. We saw that, if I have Muktze Mechad, if the kids made a mess in the house, they brought mud into the house. The mud isn't Muktze, it is Muktze, but I could carry the mud out because it's embarrassing, because yuck, right? Because you end up saying, yeah, anything that makes me uncomfortable, right? And that's kind of that doesn't allow the whole world of Muktze. I mean, many things within the world of Muktze would no longer. You'd be able to get away with a lot. I'd say that way. That's the Mordechai's problem. The Bach says, yeah, better. Like, fair enough, but that it is what it is. Like, what there is a real heter if you really do find this repulsive and irritating. So yeah, you could get rid of it. That's the halacha. I think that part of the discussion we saw Shlomo Zalman really does say, yes, if the kids made a mess in the house, so yeah, remove it because you're embarrassed. The guests might come and you don't want your house to look good. Yes.
Identify with, but like repulsion and embarrassment is not exactly the same thing. In other words, the difference is exactly, did I clean it up when I didn't have guests coming? I didn't clean it up when I didn't have guests coming. Apparently it didn't repulse me enough. I know that it's not socially acceptable, and so when guests are going to come, I will clean it up. Right.
The question is, when I say the repulsion, it depends on context. How far do we go with that? I think it's part of the question. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like define context, right? Context of it's in my living room, and I want to sit and learn in my living room, or on the Shabbos table, and then we want to eat on the Shabbos table, or the guests are here. There's different kind of context. Right.
Yes,
it's also a context issue, but it's different kind. I agree. Right.
I'm aware of this irony that there's things that I would tolerate in the week because I just leave the house. I would not in the house
because you're not around.
But in Shabbos, like I'm in the house, so it bothers saying it's tricky.
Right. Yeah. So that's part of the problem is Davka on Shabbos were a lot more sensitive, right? Right, during the week, you don't want to see my house, but that's kind of the point. That's why I keep you out of my house during the week. If you ever wonder, do I keep out of my house during the week? Anyway, so the other side of this we're going to go into now, where we have indication that you shouldn't create the heter either. The problem with this kind of leniency is that the Mordechai was saying, the parameters are so difficult to gauge that I don't want. That even though I know it's mutar, I'm kind of worried of how lenient can I be in that context, even though I know it's mutar, right? If you really are of a delicate nature, Bobby says, right? If you really are an istanis, so of course you're allowed, but don't be too hasty in defining yourself as istanis because suddenly you're going to start cleaning your whole house on Shabbos, right? So we see the other side of this in the Gemara in Beit Tzedaf Kaf Aleph. I mentioned this last week in the context of. I mentioned this Gemara last week in the context of having guests over on Yantiv, Goyim over on Yantiv. Right? What was the story? to make a tea and kli shlishi on Yantiv, right? Because you're not to cook for a goy on Yantiv. This says over here in the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, mezamnim et hanuchri b'Shabbat, bein mezamnim et hanuchri b'Yom Tov, gzera shemei yarbe b'shvilo. The problem on Yantiv is that you'll probably end up cooking for the goy on Yantiv. The problem with having a goy over on Shabbat is that he's going to make the dishes dirty. Now, you might argue that my kids make what? Saying anti-Semitism, yes. Don't be surprised. Like, right.
We can wash up my dishes afterwards as well.
He says, I don't understand. But we said you're allowed to clear the dishes even if you have Muktze in them. You should refrain from creating a situation in which you actively create that Heter. Now, what's interesting is no one ever said don't have guests over on Shabbos because they'll dirty your dishes. This actually happened to me. Ever happened to you? You have guests over on Shabbos? And yes. Really? It's very odd. I thought only Goyim make the dishes dirty. Yeah. It turns out that even just good Jewish guests might make your dishes dirty. So that's the. So what's the difference? The difference is that who needs to clean up after the guy's dishes. So if you can have him over during the week, and then you'll have to clean up his mess and beseder. But why should you bring the mess to you and create the heter? That's the problem.
Why? The heter.
Why?
Jew. And the Jew, you didn't answer. The
Jew.
He has to eat in Shabbat also.
Right, exactly. The Jews, everyone needs to eat every day, right? Now, especially on Shabbat. Now, if the Jew can choose to eat at his house or my house, someone's gonna have to clear the dishes. A Jew is gonna have to clear the dishes anyway. So what's the difference? As opposed to the guy, causing a Jew to clear
something that was created by someone.
Right now, the problem is that you're creating the heter of graf shel re'i. They're not saying if the guy eats there, you're not to touch it. They're saying if he ate there, so it's graf shel re'i, you can clear it. But who gave you the right to create the situation? So, this tells us how machmir we are in trying to avoid using the heter.
Okay.
So, bemet, when there was a Shabbos, I had a guy from a friend of mine, when we lived in Shvut, a friend of mine from Gush. They came over Leil Shabbat, the Suda, and when they came home, they told me he's a guy. Yeah, I said, we've been learning all these years. Yeah, yes, exactly. In Al Shvut, yeah. And as I walk in, my wife says, "Quick, just take the garbage out." And he says, "You take the garbage out, right? You just started Shabbos." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "Rav Lichtenstein is makpid to always empty out the garbage right before Shabbat." Why? Because you're allowed to take the garbage out. Graf shel re'i, you don't want the garbage overfilling in your house on Shabbat. You're allowed to take it out on Shabbat, but you shouldn't create the situation. So by taking the garbage out right before Shabbat, you're minimizing the heter. It's Rav Lichtenstein. So Aruch HaShulchan debates whether Rav Lichtenstein is a chiyuv or just Rav Lichtenstein, So Aruch HaShulchan says, what?
You told me I was coming to the
That was last week.
Oh, you advertised more into.
Oh, you're right. If we get to the next bit. Aruch HaShulchan, אין עושים גרף של רי לכתחילה, והיינו להביא דבר שעתיד להימאס בכדי שאחר כך יהיה מוכרח להוציאה. למה לנו לגרום טלטול מוקצה בחינה במקום שאין הכרח? I just want to point out, it all starts from the gavra as opposed to chefza thing, right? Now, if it was a chefza thing, that this item is not muktze, so I'm allowed to carry it. It's not muktze, I'm allowed to carry it. Since it's based on context, So it's only a Gavra thing. When it repulses me, then I'm allowed to carry it. So why create the situation in which you're carrying Muktze? You're carrying Muktze that you're allowed to carry. But why create that situation? יש לי הסתפק בגרף של ראי כשהייתה מערב שבת, ויכול לנקותה מבעוד יום, שידע שיצטרך להישב שם בשבת, אם לא ניקה מבעוד יום, מותר לנקותה בשבת, he wants to say more. If you didn't take the garbage out right before Shabbat, if it was, again, if it had just a few items in it, etc. But if the garbage was already full, right?
Yeah, that's what it's showing.
That's full right before Shabbat.
This is just a feature, yeah.
What usually happens is, as you're cleaning on Friday, an hour before Shabbat, you take the garbage out. 2 hours before Shabbat, you take the garbage out, or one of your kids takes the garbage out, and then you put a new bag in, and then it's half full by the time Shabbos comes. No, I think it's the usual thing.
It's normally like, right.
Yeah, full is yeah. This says the Shtam Kubetzet, the Ramban really says that again. We're not talking about.
I'm confused about it for a minute. No, not an hour, because it's like what? When did you do something wrong? When did you make graph shadows really clear?
Right, you're saying so the lasod graph shadow lechatchila. His understanding is it's not that you're not allowed. It's not a Shabbos isur.
Like
right. Now there's the isur. I want to define this a bit better. Right. The point is that the way the Gemara is phrased is you can say there's an isur on Shabbos to create a graph shel re'i. Right. The Aruch HaShulchan is assuming that that's not necessarily the way it works. The isur is not creating graph shel re'i on Shabbos. It's causing myself to have to use this heter on Shabbos.
What you say? Just creating that?
even in a passive way of not cleaning it up beforehand.
Right. Even that.
Say, repeat what you said. Not good.
Creating the heter.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Causing myself to have to depend on the leniency. Huh?
Isn't it amazing how much essential and important place Muktze has? I know we discussed this before, but it's
Yes.
so much about Rabbanan.
Yes. It's all Drabanan, and yet we're.
So concerning my
I mean, look at the Marin units. There are like 9. There are 12 units just on Muktze. That's almost as much as Bishul. How many on all Avot Melacha? There's like 3 times that. But it's all Avot Melacha. Like,
yeah.
It's the same as like 10 Melachot. Yeah. But that's what makes the Shabbos in a way. Muktze is the Shabbos. That's why you're not to draw on Shabbos, right? That's what my kids say. Anyway. Says Shtam Kubetzet b'Shem Ramban, וכי גרף של לכתחילה פירוש שלו לצורך, אבל לצורך גם זריקת קליפין ועצמות לפנים בשעה שאנו אוכלים מותר ואפילו לכתחילה. I think Rafi asked last week, right? About the people who'd make sure to create a basis לדבר האסור והמותר in order to avoid, right? What? About people who ate nuts in the yeshiva or something? Wasn't you? I'm sorry. Someone else must have just said it to me. Anyway, the Ramban's point is this doesn't mean you need to go out of your way to avoid, right? Maybe you want to eat without making your dish dirty, right? That's the solution, right? Eat without a plate, right?
You lick the plate.
You lick the plate. There you go. Right. So the Ramban is saying you don't need to go. You don't need to go to extremes. You can act naturally, but you shouldn't create situations that will cause this heter. Now, to define situations which we cause this heter better, let's see the Gemara in Beit Salamid Vav. So there was a leak in his how do you say rechaim, where he forgetting all my words now. How do you say rechaim? Where you crush the grain.
Mill.
Where the mill, thank you, yes. In the mill. And the problem was that the mill wasn't really waterproof. So it was kind of getting all muddy and stuff. Amale zil ailei Rabbi went to Rabbi and said, I'm not sure what to do because I'm upset. I know that it's ruining my meal. So here's what you should do. Take your bed, put it in the mill house, and try to sleep there. Good luck. And you'll be like, oh, this is yuck with all the mud and stuff and everything.
It's in a position that is becoming.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Right?
Then you'll be able to do something about the leak.
Then you'd be allowed to do something about the leak.
What's like what?
Something that you find repulsive, something you find irritating. L'chora.
Yeah.
That's as far as we said in Shlomo Zalman too, right? Like, wait, I don't understand. You're causing the situation that would enable my leniency. Didn't we say you're not allowed to do that? So yeah, the whole mill house collapsed. So Abai says, yeah, I learned my lesson. I was like, that's on me. That one's on me, basically, right? Tetili is like, yeah, I accept the divine judgment here. Now, but the question is, who is right? Abai made a fair point, right? All right, so this is a machloket rishonim, and I think there's important definitions that to derive this. See the Rambam, bottom of page 6. The Rambam says, "Nitim kli tachad adelef, v'nitmala kli shofech v'shoneh v'no nimna, v'ushi adelef roi l'rchitza, v'no ra'u yenotnin." Fine, so you can empty out the water as long as it could be used to wash dishes. All right. אבל מינו ראוי אין נותנים, ואם נתן, מוטל לטלטל במים מוסין, שבו שאין עושים גרף של ריח לכתחילה. So, you're not allowed to put a dish there that will get yucky, right? B'diavad, you'd be allowed to carry it, but lechatchila, you're not allowed to cause the situation. L'chora, this is not very different from what Abai was saying. He was saying, I can't put the bed there, I can't put the dish there, I can't put whatever, right? The Rambam saying, in this context, he's saying basically like Abai, right? He isn't suggesting, oh, why don't you move the family's meal to the place where the leak is happening? And then that'll be too yucky and you'll be able to clear things, right? The Rambam basically says, the Rambam doesn't suggest Rabba's suggestion. So he does accept Abai's position. He says, if you have a leak, so you can carry it if it's clean enough. And if not, so not. Maybe you can cause it to be a graf shalvei. He doesn't raise that. In the context, it's very clear the Rambam is taking our Gemara. Like, he wouldn't talk about Klit. We have no other Gemara that discusses Klit HaChabdel if the Rambam doesn't invent his own situation. So l'chora, he's ignoring Rabba pointedly. So it seems Abai is right, according to the Rambam. Now, you might say, wait a minute, but Abaye's, the mill, that house collapsed, right? That room collapsed. And Abaye said, yeah, that was, right, he accepted the divine judgment. So the Beit Yosef says, Abaye said, Abaye asked a question, and the Gemara did not offer an answer. We see that Abaye is right. What?
He's right. Like
Abai was right that he should not have that you're not allowed. Yeah. Just being from whatever. He's being aninut generally means something has to do with avilut and evil, right? It's a form of mourning to say divine judgment. But it's his way of mourning, really. Meaning, truly, according to the Rambam, there's the way the Beit Yosef reads the Rambam, that Abai accepted that Abai was right, And if you have a leak, you're not allowed to move your things to there in order to turn that into graf shel re'i, because you're not allowed to create the heter. Now, I pointedly said you're not allowed to create the heter because shortly we're going to see Rishonim who understand differently. Now, you notice that Aruch HaShulchan said, if you cause the situation, I'm not sure you're allowed to clear it, right? The Rambam explicitly said you are. He says you're not allowed to create the situation, right? So the Magid Mishneh says the following. He basically says like this. I want to explain what he says before we read him. He says, why not? You're not allowed to cause the heter. If you cause the heter, let's say I transgressed that and I caused the heter. What do I do now? And you should use it because Kvod Shabbat. Meaning, once you have this heter, you're not supposed to not use it. The whole point is you're supposed to have Kvod Shabbat. So you don't have the right to not use the heter. And that's why you're not allowed to cause the heter, because then you won't be allowed to machmir. And that's why the Isur is phrased as ein osin graf shel re'i lechatchila. So let's read the Magid Mishneh inside. But on lechatchila, on top of page 7, sorry. Top of page 7. Top of page 7. באומרם לכתחילה למד רבנו שאם עבר ועשה מותר לטלטלו, שאם אסור למה היינו עושים אותו לכתחילה? מה ההפסד יש בעשייתו אם לא היה מותר לטלטלו כשנעשה? Why are you not allowed to create? Doesn't say graf shel re'i she'asa, right? Graf shel re'i she'asa asur l'taltalo or anything like that. He says you're not to create the heter. Once you create the heter, you should use it. Now, Shulchan Aruch Rav Mela says that if you could avoid that, you are allowed. Shulchan Aruch Rav says, "Im ein b'dato b'tchila sheyotzenu achar kach mutar la'asot ken naf lechatchila." But if you think that this, I don't find this so repulsive, I'll cause it and etc. I won't move it later. It'll be fine. I won't find it so. It won't be so irritating to me. Then you're allowed to do it. Why? Because the whole point is you're not allowed to cause the heter as such. If you think you could avoid using the heter, so there's no problem with creating the heter. That's what the Shulchan Aruch Rav says. Even if, now what happens if you then change your mind? Right? You say, yeah, I can cope with this. I'm not that sensitive. I'm not that delicate. I'll be fine. I'm not a snowflake. Right? I'll be fine. And then you say, no, I can't cope. You can't cope. So use the heter. So you're not to cause the heter knowingly. The chatchila. So that's just based on the Rambam. So just to sum up the 2 points in the Rambam. Point number 1, the Rambam accepts Abaye's position and says you're not allowed to turn the arena of whatever it is to be around the family too close, because then that would cause you to use the heter. The Magid Mishneh learns from here that Mimela, the whole Isur is causing myself to use the heter. But once you are repulsed, you should use the heter. It is right and correct to use the heter. So, once it's there. All right. The Rashba learns differently. It says the Rashba Yutomal, שפרק הבית, נושאים לכתחילה, כדי אמרין ליל בפרק יום טוב, גבי שיעורי כסות ואיך ישארי רבה. How did Rabbah say, move your bed to there, and then that'll cause it to be graf shel re'i? So one option is that Muktze, that you could use, and we're not even talking about a heter to move Muktze stam. We're talking about the heter, the regular heter graf shel re'i, causing it to be graf shel re'i, causing a graf shel re'i in order to have monetary, to avoid monetary damage. So that's the one option. Or the Shloma the Hachashani the Maim Ika, Vinora Shemchnis Midato Lasham. ממילא נעשה גרף של ראי. התם דמשקה את הגוי בכוסו, הוא עושה את הגרף לכתחילה. Meaning, did I create the repulsive thing, or did I turn the already existent repulsive thing into something that I'm repulsed by? In other words, I turned, as we said, the context matters, right? The context, the graf shel re'i depends on what context it's in. If it's out in the garden, in the corner of the garden, and no one goes there, so there's no heter, right? But, okay, am I allowed to say, you know what, let's go sit and enjoy the view of the corner of the garden? So Rambam would say, no, because you're causing the heter. There's no real difference between bringing it to you or going out to it, right? Just like Muhammad and the... Right, there's no real difference between those two, says the Rambam, because the whole point, the whole issue is causing the heter. It's all a gavra thing. There's no difference between inviting it into my house and then causing it to be there, or my going out to where it is and then necessitating the heter. Right? The Rambam says that those two are the same because ultimately it's not a chefta thing. It's not that there's an objective repulsive thing. It's all a certain extent of repulsion in the context of where of the family context and where you spend Shabbat context. Mimela, what's the difference between bringing it into my house or my going out to it? It's all the same, says the Rambam. As opposed to the Rashba disagrees, and the Rashba says the Rashba in the Rashba's first answer might agree, and then he says, yeah, but monetary loss here really would justify it. But the second option is saying there is already something repulsive. I didn't create it. I only made myself my proximity to it. By affecting my proximity to it, by doing that, I've turned it into a heter. So the whole Isur is creating the situation. That's so I think there's a fundamental machloket. I saw you, Baruch, just one sec. I think there's a fundamental machloket here. The Rambam says there's no difference between my going to it or it coming to me because it's all a gavra thing. It's all based on my proximity to something. We said that something that's of great repulsion, right? Our tolerance will be very low. And even if it's in the garden, I'll be allowed to clean it out, right? As opposed to there could be something that's very low level repulsion, but it's on the Shabbos table, and then I have no tolerance for it at all, right? So the Rambam says it makes no difference whether I go to it or it comes to me. I'm creating the heter. The Rashba says no. You're now to create the graf shel re'i. You're now to create the item. You're not to create the repulsion. The repulsive. I'd say the Rambam would say you're not to create the repulsive circumstances, and the Rashba says you're now to create the item. Have a look at the Meiri. The Meiri goes in the similar vein to the Rashba. Makom shaderef yored bo ve'en bo din graf shel re'i. Now you'll note. Haderef yored bo, right? There's a leak. It doesn't have a din graf shel re'i, right? It could be an objectively
It's in your mill,
right.
It's like what you were saying about places.
Right.
The mill when I'm not there is not.
Exactly. There's no din of a graf shel re'i. Why? Because it's out there. Mutar la'asot is ishtadlut lechatchila sheyeh bo din graf shel re'i. Meaning, what he's saying is the graf shel re'i is there already, but it doesn't have a din of graf shel re'i because my proximity to it. I'm not there. So here's a solution: go there. Then it'll be graf shel re'i. Kitzad. הרי שהדלף זה בבית אחד שלו, אלא שאינו דר בו. מותר להכניס מיטתו לשם כדי שיעשה אותו הבית אצלו גרף של ראי, ורשאי להוציאו להישמר ממנו בשפיכת כלי והחזרתו. אבל לעשות דבר עצמו שאינו מאוס, שימאיסנו כדי להוציאו, אסור. So you're allowed to create the proximity and allowed to create the item. So I think there's as I said, I think there's an acronym chloket here between the Rambam and the Rashba and Meiri. The Rashba and Meiri, they're saying if the objectively repulsive thing is already happening, I'm allowed to change my proximity to it and therefore create the din. Because I didn't create a graf shel re'i, I created a din graf shel re'i. I caused that din to happen. As opposed to the Rambam says, there's no difference. There's no such thing as an objective graf shel re'i. There's only the relationship between where I want to spend Shabbat and where things that are yucky are. You don't have to create the thing and make the things that are yucky be closer to you or make you closer to them. There's no real difference between those two. So now you'll note in Rashi, in a different Rashi in Daf Kaf Aleph. Rashi in Daf Kaf Aleph about the goy. There he accepts the Rambam. See Rashi. Right. Once the graph shalari is here, you're allowed to get rid of it. Right? Rashi has no need to mention, right, atui lekaman, to bring it here, or for us to go there. Either way, it says Rashi is not justifiable. So the Rashi really does sound very much like the Rambam, right? So Rashi and the Rambam seem to say, "My going to it or coming to me." So that's the Kurli Machloket here. When I say that you're not to create graf sheli rechatchila, does that mean I'm not allowed to create something that is repulsive, or am I saying I'm not allowed to create the din of the repulsive thing? The Rambam and Rashi say you're not allowed to create the din because it's all subjective. It's not an objective thing anyway. And the Meiri from the wording, you see very strongly in the Meiri says there's an objective situation of graf sheli. It's just lacking the din. So all I'm doing is creating the din. So, have a look at the Shulchan Aruch. B'makom de'ika pseida. Mutar lachnis mitzvot etzel graf sheli l'kbar yeshivato sham kedei lo tzio. Right? Why is he saying de'ika pseida? If there's significant monetary loss, then you're allowed. Why? Why does he say this? To like the Rashba's first answer, not like the second one, right? Sounds like he's machmir, right? You see by the way, sorry. He doesn't say you're allowed to create graf sheli rechatchila. You're allowed to lachnis mitato and then. It sounds like the Gra says he took both answers.
What is the situation of creating the graf sheli would be beneficial to you, no?
You're saying what's
Let's create.
What's the other?
Okay.
You're saying how would you? You're saying bring the bed in is an example. It's an easy example to demonstrate this. Is it? You're saying this. The Gra wants to say based on this that only if both are true, right? The Gra says you could matir only in this case because I don't know. Basically, I don't know that any other case exists. That in any other case I'd be allowed to matir, right? The Rashi brings two answers. Tosfot also brings both the two answers. The Rashi was just clear. That's why I quoted him. Rashi and Tosfot say two answers. One is the Hefsed Merubah, and the other is that I'm just going to it and not creating it. The Gra says, so you see that in a situation in which one of these doesn't exist, I don't know of a Heter. Says Yaakov, wait, but do you have any handy example in which you'd have Pseida, but you wouldn't be able to? Trying to think. It's worth thinking about. Cases in which we saw forms of Pseida. I have to think about it. If I can think of another example that would be similar. Shatova.